If you had told me a year ago that my family would be torn apart on the very day we were supposed to come together, I would have laughed and called you dramatic. I always thought I was the kind of woman who could see trouble coming from a mile away. I run a small CPA firm from my home office in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a numbers person, a planner, a fixer. I've spent my life making sure every detail is in order, every bill is paid, every birthday remembered. I thought I knew how to keep my world safe, but nothing could have prepared me for the morning I caught my husband with my son's fiancée. It was the day of Elijah's wedding. I woke up at 5, unable to sleep, my mind racing with last-minute details. The caterer, the flowers, the seating chart, everything had to be perfect. I'd spent months tending the rose bushes that would cover the arch Franklin built for the ceremony. I'd checked the string lights 3 times, making sure not a single bulb was out. I wanted this day to be flawless for Elijah, my only son, the boy I'd raised for 23 years with every ounce of love I had. Franklin, my husband of 25 years, was the charmer. He was the one who made people laugh at parties, who could talk his way out of a speeding ticket, who always seemed to know the right thing to say. I was the foundation, the steady hand, the one who made sure the house ran smoothly. For a long time, that was enough for me. But lately I'd felt a distance growing between us. Franklin's phone was always tilted away from me. He stopped talking when I entered the room. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd just laugh and say, "Just work, honey." Big promotion on the line. I chose to believe him. What else could I do? You don't throw away 25 years of marriage over a feeling. That morning, as I sat in my office staring at spreadsheets, Elijah came in, looking exhausted. He was in his pajamas, holding a mug of coffee, his face drawn and pale. "Mom, you've been up for hours," he said. "The wedding isn't until 4. "I just want everything to be perfect for my boy," I said, forcing a smile as I closed my laptop. He sat on the edge of my desk, suddenly looking much younger. "Your dad is still sleeping. He left early," Elijah said, his voice strange. He said something about picking up a gift for Madison's parents, the Ellingtons. I frowned. That was news to me. "Mom," he said, hesitating, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetie. What's on your mind?" He took a deep breath. "Do you think Madison really loves me?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Madison, his fiancée, was beautiful, ambitious, and from a wealthy family. On the surface, she was everything we'd hoped for Elijah. But I'd seen the way her eyes drifted when Elijah talked about his passions, how she checked her phone during family dinners. I'd had my own doubts. "Why would you ask that, honey? It's your wedding day." "I know, and maybe it's just last-minute jitters," he mumbled, staring into his coffee. "But sometimes when she looks at me, I feel like she's looking right through me, like I'm just a box she needed to check off on her way to the perfect life." He paused. "And lately, she's been spending a lot of time with Dad. They're always talking about finances, investments. She says he's mentoring her. I wanted to tell him about the things I'd noticed, too. How Franklin's eyes followed Madison around the room. How he always found excuses to help her with her coat or refill her drink. How he knew exactly how she liked her coffee, 2 sugars and a splash of milk, without having to ask. But I just squeezed Elijah's hand. "Wedding jitters are normal, sweetie. Marriage is the biggest step you'll ever take." "It's not just jitters, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain that terrified me. "I think she's in love with someone else." I froze, my blood turning to ice. "What makes you say that?" "Little things," he whispered. "The way she lights up when Dad calls. How she always asks about him first when she comes over. I saw them in the garden yesterday, just talking. And the way he looked at her, it wasn't how a father-in-law should look at his son's fiancée." I forced my voice to stay steady. "Elijah, that's a very serious accusation." "I know," he said, shrugging. "And I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong." Before I could reply, the door opened again. It was Franklin, already dressed in an impeccable shirt and dress slacks, looking immaculate as always. "Well, look at my 2 favorite people," he exclaimed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Big day, son. You should be getting ready." He turned to me. "And you, Simone, you're going to wear yourself out." Madison just called. She's coming by around 10 to discuss some last-minute seating chart details. I watched Elijah's expression tighten. "What details?" he asked. Oh, just making sure her parents don't sit next to your Uncle James after that political argument last Christmas, Franklin said with a dismissive wave. You know how special her family is. We should discuss it privately because of the politics and all that. Of course, Elijah said, his voice flat. We can't have the wrong people sitting together. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I watched my husband and my son, and I knew deep in my soul that Elijah wasn't wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. After Franklin and Elijah left my office, a cold dread seized me. I was supposed to have a final call with the caterer at 10:30, a call I had been planning for weeks. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, and told them I had a family emergency and needed to reschedule. It was a lie. The truth was I had cleared my entire morning. I couldn't shake Elijah's words, nor the nauseating feeling that Franklin's false cheer had provoked. Something was happening in my house today, and for the first time in 25 years, I intended to find out what it was. I spent the next 2 hours pretending to be busy. I tidied the kitchen, which was already spotless. I rearranged the floral centerpieces on the dining room table. Every sound made me jump. Every passing car made my heart hammer against my ribs. I felt like an actress in a play, performing the role of the happy mother of the groom. While inside, I twisted with anxiety. Exactly at 10:12, a sleek white BMW pulled into our driveway, Madison's car. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out. Even in simple jeans and a blouse, she looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She walked up to the front door with the natural confidence of someone who knows she belongs. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I crept out the back door and circled the house, crouching low behind the large hydrangea bushes that bordered our living room windows. I felt ridiculous, like a spy in my own home. But the need to know, the need to confirm my fears or dispel them, was overwhelming. Through the large bay window, I could see them. Franklin had let her in, and they were standing by the fireplace, the spot where we took our family pictures every Christmas. He was pouring her a drink. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language said it all. They stood close, too close. His hand rested low on her back. It was a casual gesture, one that could be easily explained away, but it lingered there for a second too long. I clenched my hands into fists, my nails digging into my palms. 25 years we had built a life in this house. We had read stories to Elijah on that very sofa. We had hosted countless family parties in that room. And now my husband was standing there caressing another woman, my son's fiancée, on our son's wedding day. I was about to stand up, to storm in like a fury and confront them right then and there. I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care about the wedding. I only cared about the scorching betrayal I was witnessing. But then I noticed movement in the upstairs hallway, a shadow in the glass's reflection. I looked closer. It was Elijah. He was standing at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, watching them too. The sight of him, so still and broken, stopped me cold. This wasn't just my pain. It was his. Downstairs, things had escalated. Madison's hand was now on Franklin's chest. She leaned into him, her head tilted back, a smile playing on her lips. She said something and he laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in years, light, genuine, happy, the way he used to laugh with me when we were young and everything seemed possible. In that moment, I saw my husband transform into someone I didn't recognize, someone alive in a way he hadn't been with me for a long, long time. Then his hands were in her hair and they were kissing. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind you see in movies. My vision went red. A roar filled my ears. I took a step toward the house, ready to rip the door from its hinges, ready to scream until my lungs gave out. And then a hand gripped my arm. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Elijah. He had slipped out of the house and come to find me. His face was pale, ashen, but his eyes burned with a cold, hard determination I had never seen before. "Mom, don't," he whispered, his voice strained. "Not yet, Elijah. This is," I choked on the words. "I couldn't even say it. I know what it is," he said. His voice was steady, though I could see his hands trembling. "Mom, I've known for weeks." "Weeks?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. I stared at my son, the boy I had raised, who now looked at me with the eyes of a man who had seen too much. We were still crouched behind the hydrangeas. The beautiful flowers I'd been so proud of were now serving as a hiding place for the destruction of our family. Inside the house, my husband and my son's fiancée had moved from the fireplace to the sofa. I couldn't bear to look. I didn't want to believe it at first, Elijah said, his voice low and urgent. I kept making excuses for them. He's just being kind. She's just nervous about joining the family. But it kept happening. The lingering looks, the private conversations, the way she lit up whenever he was near. He corrected himself, a painful reminder of a life that no longer existed. She was supposed to be getting a new mother figure, not a rival. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of shock and a strange protective rage. You shouldn't have had to carry this alone. Because I needed proof, he said, his jaw clenched. And because, he looked at me, his eyes much older than his 23 years. I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves. He pulled out his phone. His hands shook slightly as he tapped the screen. I hired someone, he confessed. What did you do? I'm not stupid, Mom. After I saw them having lunch together a month ago, a lunch Dad told me was a business meeting, and she told me was an afternoon shopping with her girlfriends. I knew I wasn't crazy. I needed to know the truth. He handed me the phone. I scrolled through a gallery of betrayal, photos of Franklin and Madison walking into a hotel, leaving together hours later, looking heated and disheveled. Photos of them in dimly lit restaurants across the city. Photos of them laughing, holding hands, living a completely different life behind our backs. I stared at the photos, my hands trembling. The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown affair, a secret life that had been unfolding right under my nose. I felt sick, the world tilting beneath me. My marriage, my family, my son's future, all of it was unraveling in the space of a few heartbeats. Elijah, I'm so sorry, I whispered, my voice breaking. You shouldn't have had to go through this alone. He shook his head, his jaw set. I'm not the one who should be sorry, Mom. They are. But I need you to trust me. I have a plan. A plan? I echoed, still reeling. He nodded, his eyes hard. If we confront them now, they'll deny everything. Dad will say you're being hysterical, that you misunderstood. Madison will cry and play the victim. They'll twist it all back on us. But if we wait, if we let them think they've gotten away with it, we can expose them in front of everyone. No more lies, no more secrets, just the truth, out in the open, where they can't hide. I looked at my son, seeing not just the boy I'd raised, but a man forged in the fire of betrayal. He was right. Franklin was a master manipulator. He could charm his way out of anything. Madison was just as cunning. If we wanted justice, we had to be smart. We had to be patient. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Tell me what you need me to do. Elijah outlined his plan in a low, urgent whisper. He had already contacted my sister, Aisha, a retired police officer turned private investigator. She had been tracking Franklin and Madison for weeks, gathering evidence, photos, receipts, even video footage. She was ready to act, but only when we gave the signal. We'll wait until the reception, Elijah said. When everyone's there, family, friends, Madison's parents, Dad's colleagues. We'll play the slideshow Aisha put together. Let them see the truth with their own eyes. The thought of public humiliation made my stomach churn, but I knew it was the only way. Franklin and Madison had built their relationship on lies. It was time for the truth to tear it all down. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through the motions of wedding preparations, my mind a storm of anger and grief. I smiled for the photographer, greeted guests, and made small talk with relatives. All the while, I was counting down the hours until the reckoning. Franklin was in his element, charming the guests, laughing with Madison's parents, acting every bit the proud father of the groom. Madison floated through the house like a queen, her smile radiant, her eyes bright with anticipation. Only Elijah and I knew the storm that was coming. As the ceremony approached, I found myself standing alone in the garden, staring at the arch Franklin had built. The roses I had tended all spring were in full bloom, their fragrance heavy in the air. I thought about the years I had spent nurturing this family, pouring my love and energy into a life that now felt like a lie. Aisha found me there, her presence a quiet comfort. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "As ready as I'll ever be." She squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think, Simone. Don't let them take that from you." The ceremony was beautiful, a perfect illusion. Madison walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory lace, her father beaming with pride. Elijah stood at the altar, his face a mask of calm. Franklin gave a heartfelt speech about love and family, his words ringing hollow in my ears. When it was over, the guests moved to the reception tent, where tables were set with fine china and crystal glasses. The air was filled with laughter and music, the clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, my heart pounding with anticipation. Finally, the moment arrived. Aisha took the microphone, her voice steady and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the dancing, we have a special slideshow to share, a tribute to the bride and groom and to the family that brought us all together." The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. At first, it was innocent. Enough, photos of Elijah as a child, family vacations, birthday parties. Then the images changed. Franklin and Madison, together in places they shouldn't have been. Hotel lobbies, restaurants, parking lots. The evidence was irrefutable. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Madison's mother covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Franklin stood frozen, his face drained of color. Madison's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure terror. Elijah stepped forward, his voice ringing out over the stunned silence. "This is the truth. My father and my fiancée have been having an affair. They lied to all of us, they betrayed our family, and today, in front of everyone, I'm ending it." The room erupted into chaos. Madison's parents rushed to her side. Franklin tried to speak but was drowned out by the angry shouts of the guests. Elijah turned to me, his eyes shining with tears. "It's over, Mom. We're free." I pulled him into my arms, holding him close as the world we had known crumbled around us. In that moment, I knew we would survive. We would rebuild. We would find a way to heal. The aftermath of the wedding was a blur of tears, phone calls, and headlines. The story spread through our community like wildfire. "Groom's mother exposes affair at wedding" was the talk of Atlanta for weeks. I received messages from friends, clients, even strangers, some offering support, others just hungry for gossip. I ignored most of them. My focus was on Elijah. He moved back home for a while, his world shattered. He spent hours in his old room, sometimes just sitting in silence, sometimes talking to me late into the night. We grieved together, not just for the wedding that never was, but for the family we thought we had. I tried to be strong for him, but there were nights I cried myself to sleep, mourning the loss of the man I thought I'd married and the future I'd imagined for my son. Franklin tried to call, but I let every call go to voicemail. He left messages, apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness. I deleted them all. There was nothing left to say. Madison's parents sent a letter, a formal apology for their daughter's actions, but it was clear they were more concerned about their own reputation than our pain. Aisha was my rock. She checked in every day, bringing groceries, helping with paperwork, and just sitting with me when the loneliness felt overwhelming. She encouraged Elijah to see a therapist, and after some resistance, he agreed. It was the best decision he could have made. Slowly, he began to heal. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, Elijah turned to me. "Mom, do you think I'll ever trust anyone again?" I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I do know that trust isn't about never being hurt. It's about learning to recognize the people who are worthy of it. You will love again, and next time, you'll choose someone who truly deserves you." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I want to believe that. You will, I promised. And so will I. The weeks turned into months. I threw myself into my work, grateful for the distraction. My clients were understanding, and business slowly picked up again. I started going to yoga classes, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. I reconnected with old friends, went to book club meetings, and even took a weekend trip to the mountains with Aisha. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. Elijah found solace in gardening. He spent hours in the backyard, turning the soil, planting new flowers, and creating a space of beauty and peace. It became his sanctuary, a place where he could process his pain and begin to dream again. I joined him sometimes, and we would work side by side in comfortable silence, the sun warm on our backs. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing, Elijah broke the silence. "I got a letter from Madison." I tensed, unsure how to respond. "What did she say?" She apologized. Said she was sorry for everything, that she never meant to hurt me. She said she's in therapy, trying to figure out why she did what she did. "Do you believe her?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Part of me wants to hate her, but another part just feels sorry for her. She's lost everything, Mom. Her job, her reputation, her family. I wouldn't wish that on anyone," I nodded, understanding. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from their hold on you. You don't have to forget, but you can choose to move on. He smiled, a small, genuine smile. "I'm trying. As the seasons changed, so did we. The pain faded, replaced by a quiet strength. We learned to laugh again, to find joy in the little things, a good meal, a beautiful sunset, a shared joke. We rebuilt our lives, not as the perfect family we once pretended to be, but as two people who had survived the worst and come out stronger." Franklin eventually moved out of Atlanta, unable to face the consequences of his actions. I heard through the grapevine that he was living in a small town up north, working odd jobs and keeping to himself. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a deep, abiding sadness for the man he could have been. Madison's trial made the news. She pled guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Her parents stood by her, but their social circle shrank. The Ellington name, once synonymous with respect and influence, was now a cautionary tale. A year after the wedding, Elijah came to me with a request. "Mom, I want to meet Zoe." I was surprised, but I understood. Zoe was Franklin's daughter, the half-sister Elijah never knew he had. She was innocent in all of this, a victim of her father's lies just like us. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe. Zoe was shy, her eyes wide with uncertainty. But Elijah was gentle, asking her about school, her favorite books, her dreams. I watched them, my heart aching with a strange mix of grief and hope. Here, in this unlikely meeting, was the possibility of something new, a family rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Afterward, Elijah hugged me. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. For being strong when I couldn't be." I held him close, tears in my eyes. "We're in this together, always." As I watched my son walk Zoe to her car, I realized that life, for all its pain and disappointment, still held the promise of healing. We had lost so much, but we had found each other. And in the end, that was enough. The months that followed were a slow, steady climb out of darkness. I found myself waking up each morning with a little less heaviness in my chest. The house, once filled with the echoes of Franklin's laughter and Madison's bright voice, was quieter now, but it was a peaceful quiet. I filled the silence with music, with the hum of the washing machine, with the sound of my own thoughts finally allowed to breathe. Elijah threw himself into his new passion for landscape architecture. He enrolled in night classes at the local college, and I watched with pride as he poured his energy into designing gardens and green spaces. He started a small business, offering to transform neighbors' yards, and soon he had more work than he could handle. The backyard became his canvas, a riot of color and life that stood in stark contrast to the pain we'd endured. I found my own healing in small acts of self-care. I started journaling every morning, pouring my fears and hopes onto the page. I joined a yoga class where I learned to breathe through the pain and find strength in my own body. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the chaos of the past year, meeting for coffee and long walks in the park. I even took a painting class with Aisha. discovering a creative side I never knew I had. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out the attic, I found a box of old letters Franklin had written to me when we were first married. I sat on the dusty floor, reading his words, feeling a bittersweet ache. There had been love once, real and deep, but somewhere along the way it had been buried under secrets and lies. I let myself grieve for that lost love, for the life we could have had, and then I let it go. Elijah and Zoe grew closer with each passing week. They texted daily, sharing jokes and stories, slowly building a bond that was theirs alone. Zoe came over for dinner every other Sunday, her shyness fading as she grew more comfortable with us. She brought her favorite books, and Elijah introduced her to his favorite movies. I watched them, my heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Out of the wreckage of our family, something new and beautiful was growing. One evening, after Zoe had gone home, Elijah sat with me on the porch swing. The air was warm, the sky streaked with the colors of sunset. "Mom, do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" he asked. I thought for a moment, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. "Sometimes," I admitted. But then I look at where we are now, at how far we've come, and I realize that maybe this was the only way we could have found the truth. It hurt, but it set us free. He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I'm glad we have Zoe. I'm glad we have each other." "So am I, sweetheart. So am I." As the year drew to a close, I felt a sense of closure settling over our lives. The pain was still there, a scar that would never fully fade, but it no longer defined us. We had survived the worst, and we had come out stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Franklin reached out once, sending a letter through his lawyer. He apologized again, asking for forgiveness, hoping for some kind of reconciliation. I read the letter, feeling a flicker of old pain, but I knew I couldn't go back. I wrote a short reply, wishing him peace and healing, but making it clear that our lives were moving forward without him. Madison, too, tried to make amends. She sent Elijah a letter from prison, expressing her regret and asking for forgiveness. Elijah read it, then tucked it away in a drawer. "I'm not ready," he said. "Maybe someday, but not yet." I respected his decision. Forgiveness, I had learned, is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. It's about letting go of the anger, the bitterness, the need for revenge. It's about choosing peace over pain, hope over despair. As spring returned to Atlanta, our lives blossomed with new possibilities. Elijah's business flourished, and he started dating a kind, gentle woman named Rachel. They took things slow, building trust one day at a time. Zoe graduated from high school with honors, her future bright and full of promise. I watched them both, my heart full of hope. I found myself dreaming again, of travel, of new adventures, of a life lived on my own terms. I planned a trip to the coast with Aisha, eager to feel the sand between my toes and the sun on my face. I started writing a memoir, hoping to share my story with other women who had been betrayed, who needed to know they weren't alone. One evening, as I sat on the porch swing, watching the stars appear one by one, I realized that I was happy. Not the naive happiness of my youth, but a hard-won, resilient joy that came from surviving the storm. I had lost so much, but I had gained something even more precious, a sense of self, a belief in my own strength, a hope for the future. Elijah joined me, his arm around my shoulders. "We made it, Mom," he said softly. "Yes, we did," I replied, leaning into his embrace. "And we're going to be just fine." Summer brought a new energy to our lives. The garden Elijah had poured his heart into was now a riot of color. Roses, sunflowers, and wild daisies swayed in the warm breeze. I found myself spending more time outdoors, tending to the plants, feeling the earth in my hands, and letting the sun warm my face. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected, a reminder that life could still be beautiful, even after so much pain. Elijah's business continued to grow. He took on bigger projects, designing community gardens and public parks. His work was featured in a local magazine, and he was invited to speak at a conference on sustainable landscaping. I watched him blossom, his confidence returning, his laughter more frequent. Rachel, his new girlfriend, became a regular presence in our lives. She was gentle and thoughtful, always bringing a bouquet of fresh flowers or a homemade pie when she visited. I could see how much she cared for Elijah and how much he cared for her. Zoe, too, was thriving. She started college in the fall, majoring in environmental science. She came home on weekends, bringing stories of her classes and new friends. She and Elijah grew closer, their sibling bond deepening with each passing month. I loved watching them together, seeing the way they supported and encouraged each other. It was a gift I never expected, but one I cherished deeply. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping iced tea, Zoe turned to me. "Simone, do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" I thought about her question, watching the sunlight dance on the leaves. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but then I look at you and Elijah, at the family we've built, and I realize that even though we went through so much pain, we found something real." "We found each other," she smiled, her eyes shining. "I'm glad I found you too." As the weeks passed, I found myself letting go of the last remnants of anger and resentment. I forgave Franklin, not for his sake, but for mine. I forgave Madison too, understanding that her actions were born of her own pain and insecurity. I even forgave myself for not seeing the truth sooner, for holding on to a life that was already gone. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, sharing my story with others who had been betrayed, who needed to know they weren't alone. I listened to their stories, offered advice, and reminded them that it was never too late to start over. The work was hard, but it was also deeply rewarding. I saw women find their strength, rebuild their lives, and discover a sense of hope they thought they'd lost forever. One evening, as I was leaving the shelter, I ran into Aisha. She hugged me tightly, her eyes full of pride. "You're doing good work, Simone. I'm proud of you. Thank you, Aisha. I couldn't have done any of this without you." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "You always had the strength. You just needed a reason to use it." That night, as I sat on the porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in the darkness, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I thought about the journey I'd taken, the heartbreak, the anger, the fear, and finally, the freedom. I thought about the woman I'd been, the woman I'd become, and the woman I was still becoming. I realized that life is a series of chapters, each one building on the last, each one offering new lessons, new opportunities, new joys. Elijah joined me, his arm around my shoulders. "Mom, do you ever regret what happened?" I shook my head, a small smile on my lips. "No, Elijah. I regret the pain, but I don't regret the truth. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we remember the longest." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I'm glad you taught me to stand up for myself. I want to be the kind of man who faces the truth, no matter how hard it is. You already are, sweetheart. And I'm so proud of you." As the stars appeared overhead, I realized that my story wasn't just about betrayal and loss. It was about resilience, about finding the courage to start over, about discovering the strength that had always been inside me. I had lost so much, but I had gained something even more precious. A sense of self, a belief in my own worth, a hope for the future. I looked at Elijah, at Zoe, at the life we had built together, and I knew that we were going to be just fine. As autumn arrived, the air turned crisp and the leaves in our garden blazed with color. Life had settled into a new, quieter rhythm. I found myself savoring the small things. The smell of cinnamon in the kitchen, the laughter of Elijah and Zoe as they carved pumpkins, the gentle hum of Rachel's voice as she read aloud from a novel on the porch. Our home, once filled with tension and secrets, now felt like a sanctuary. Elijah's business continued to thrive. He was hired to design a memorial garden for a local hospital, a project that meant a lot to him. He poured his heart into every detail, and when it was finished, he invited me and Zoe to the dedication ceremony. As we walked through the garden, surrounded by flowers and the soft sound of water from a new fountain, I saw the pride in his eyes. "You did this," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "You turned pain into beauty." He smiled, his eyes shining. "I learned from the best, Mom." Zoe was flourishing at college. She joined the environmental club, made new friends, and even started dating a kind, thoughtful young man named Marcus. She brought him home for dinner one weekend, and I watched as she introduced him to Elijah and Rachel, her nerves quickly dissolving into laughter and easy conversation. I was grateful to see her so happy, so at ease in our family. Rachel became more than just Elijah's girlfriend. She became a friend to me as well. We spent afternoons baking together, swapping stories about our childhoods and sharing dreams for the future. She encouraged me to keep writing, to finish my memoir, and to believe that my story could help others. With her support, I submitted the first chapters to a publisher. And to my astonishment, they offered me a contract. The day the acceptance letter arrived, I sat on the porch swing, the letter trembling in my hands. Elijah and Zoe joined me, their faces alight with excitement. "You did it, Mom," Elijah exclaimed, hugging me tight. "I'm so proud of you," Zoe grinned. "I can't wait to read your book. You're going to inspire so many people." I felt a surge of joy, a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years. For so long I had defined myself by my roles, wife, mother, caretaker. Now I was discovering who I was beyond those titles. I was a survivor, a creator, a woman with a story worth telling. As the holidays approached, our home filled with warmth and laughter. We hosted Thanksgiving dinner, inviting friends, neighbors, and even some of the women from the shelter where I volunteered. The table was crowded, the food plentiful, and the conversation lively. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly grateful, not just for what I had, but for what I had overcome. After dinner, as we sat around the fire, Elijah raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice steady. "To family, to forgiveness, and to the strength to start over." We all toasted, the clink of glasses echoing in the cozy room. I looked around at the faces of the people I loved, and I knew that we had built something real, something lasting. Our family was smaller now, but it was stronger, bound together by honesty, respect, and love. One evening, as I was finishing a chapter of my memoir, I received a letter from Franklin. He wrote to say that he was in therapy, working to understand the choices he had made. He apologized again for the pain he had caused, and he wished me happiness and peace. I read the letter, feeling a mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and a quiet sense of closure. I wrote back, wishing him well, but making it clear that my life was moving forward without him. Madison, too, reached out after her release from prison. She sent a letter to Elijah, expressing her regret and asking for forgiveness. Elijah read it, then tucked it away in a drawer. "I'm not ready," he said. "But maybe someday." I respected his decision. Healing takes time, and forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on how far we had come. We had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, but we had also found resilience, hope, and new beginnings. I was proud of the woman I had become, proud of the family we had built, proud of the life I was living. On New Year's Eve, we gathered on the porch to watch the fireworks. Elijah put his arm around me, Zoe leaned her head on my shoulder, and Rachel held my hand. As the sky lit up with color, I made a silent promise to myself to keep moving forward, to keep choosing hope, to keep believing in the power of new beginnings. The new year dawned with a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in decades. I woke up early on January 1st, made a pot of coffee, and sat by the window as the first light crept over the garden Elijah had built. The world was quiet, the air crisp and full of promise. I thought about everything we had survived, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the public humiliation, and I realized that I was no longer defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by how I had chosen to rise. The weeks that followed were filled with small joys. My memoir moved through the editing process, and I worked closely with my publisher to shape it into something that would help other women find their voices. I received letters from readers who had heard about my story through the local news, women who had faced their own betrayals and were searching for hope. Their words touched me deeply, reminding me that even the most painful experiences can become a source of strength for others. Elijah's business continued to flourish. He was hired to design a healing garden for a women's shelter, a project that meant the world to both of us. He poured his heart into every detail, creating a space where women could find peace and renewal. On the day the garden was dedicated, I stood beside him, tears in my eyes as I watched the residents walk among the flowers, their faces alight with hope. Zoe thrived at college. her confidence growing with each passing semester. She joined a support group for students who had experienced family trauma, and she became a mentor to younger girls who were struggling. She came home often, bringing friends and stories, filling our house with laughter and life. She and Elijah remained close, their bond a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of family. Rachel became a permanent part of our lives. She and Elijah moved in together, and their home was always open to me and Zoe. We spent weekends cooking, gardening, and exploring the city. Rachel encouraged me to try new things, pottery classes, hiking trips, even a salsa dancing lesson that left us both breathless with laughter. She reminded me that life was meant to be lived, not just endured. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden, Rachel turned to me. "Simone, do you ever regret how everything turned out?" I thought about her question, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves. I regret the pain, the lies, the years I spent doubting myself. But I don't regret the truth. I don't regret finding out who I really am. And I don't regret the family we've become. She smiled, squeezing my hand. "You're the strongest woman I know," I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I'm just stubborn, that's all." As spring approached, I received an invitation to speak at a conference for women who had experienced betrayal and loss. I was nervous, but Rachel and Elijah encouraged me to accept. On the day of the conference, I stood before a room full of women, my heart pounding. I told them my story, the pain, the anger, the fear, and finally, the freedom. I spoke about the importance of setting boundaries, of demanding respect, of choosing yourself even when it feels impossible. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Women lined up to thank me, to share their own stories, to tell me that my words had given them hope. I realized then that my journey wasn't just about surviving. It was about helping others find the courage to survive too. That summer, I traveled with Aisha to the coast. We walked along the beach, collecting shells and talking about everything from our childhood to our dreams for the future. One evening, as we watched the sun set over the water, Aisha turned to me. "Simone, I'm proud of you. You didn't just survive, you thrived." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "I couldn't have done it without you." She hugged me, her eyes shining. "We're family. That's what we do." When I returned home, I found a letter from Franklin. He wrote to say that he was moving to another state, hoping for a fresh start. He wished me happiness and peace, and he thanked me for the years we had shared. I read the letter, feeling a sense of closure. I wished him well, knowing that I had finally let go of the anger and pain. As the year drew to a close, our family gathered for a celebration. Elijah and Rachel announced their engagement, and Zoe brought her boyfriend home to meet us. We laughed, we danced, we shared stories late into the night. I looked around at the faces of the people I loved, and I knew that we had built something real, something lasting. That night, as I sat on the porch swing, watching the stars twinkle above, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. For the second chances, for the new beginnings, for the courage to keep moving forward. I knew that my story would continue, that there were still adventures to be had, still dreams to chase, still love to give and receive. If you've listened to my story and it touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to find your strength after being betrayed? Have you ever started over when you thought it was too late? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want to support more stories like this, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these stories alive for others who need them. Thank you for being part of my journey, even if just for a little while. Remember, it's never too late to choose yourself. With love and hope, Simone.